Alright, so let's learn a new lesson today. And just to remind you, with the law of sines, you always have to check to see if it's 0, 1, or 2 triangles. So let me write all this down here. Section 7 today is the 31st. It's my brother's birthday today. His name is Justin. Some people say that we look alike, but I always tell them that the main difference between me and him is that my arms are bigger. Alright, so section 5.7, it's called the Law of Cosines. And what we do with the law of cosines, there's no such thing as the law of tangents, by the way, is we use the law of cosines if we can't use the law of sines. If we could use the law of sines, we want to use that first. Just like if you could factor, you want to factor. If you can't factor, you use quadratic formula. If you can't use law of sines, we use the law of cosines. With the law of cosines, there's no ambiguous cases, so you don't have to check for 0, 1, or 2 triangles. With the law of sines, we only check the number of triangles if you're given angle A, and side B. That's only with the law of sines. With law of cosines, it's not like that. So with the law of cosines, let me show you what the formulas are. To find a side, the formulas are that a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine of angle A. B squared is a squared plus c squared minus 2ac cosine of angle B. And c squared is a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine of angle C. That's to find the side. Now we could arrange these. Take a look at this one. If you want to find an angle, let's rearrange this. I'm going to bring b squared and c squared on the other side. You don't have to write this part down. So that would be negative b squared minus c squared plus a squared all over, that's what it would be, is equal to negative 2bc cosine of angle A. And if we want to get the cosine of angle A by itself, we could divide by negative 2bc. And that gives us the cosine of A would just be equal to, well, we could cancel out these negatives. Just multiply top and bottom by negative 1, and we get b squared plus c squared minus a squared over 2bc. So that's where the formula comes from. But if you're not interested in where it comes from, let me just write down the formulas so you have that. If you want to find an angle, this is what we do. We could get the cosine of angle A by doing b squared plus c squared minus a squared over 2bc. We could find the cosine of angle B by doing a squared plus c squared minus b squared over 2ac. And we could find the cosine of angle C by doing a squared plus b squared minus c squared over 2ab. That's our law of cosines. One thing I just want to point out is sometimes you could wind up with an answer that doesn't make sense. Like we saw with the law of sines, we always want to check to make sure the largest side is opposite the largest angle and the smallest side is opposite the smallest angle. With the law of cosines, sometimes you could do everything right, but you wind up with the smallest side not being opposite the smallest angle. So the way that we make this work is we always try to find the largest side or angle first. And that's just a tip. So what I'm going to do is let me show you a couple examples, and then what I'm going to ask you to do is some homework. Okay. So we'll do a couple examples. Let's say I told you angle A was 39 degrees. Side B is 14. Side B is 12, and side C is 14. Set everything up like we usually do. And the problem is, if you try to do the law of sines, we're going to have to do side A over the sine of angle A is equal to side B over the sine of angle B is equal to side C over the sine of angle C. And the problem is, we don't have a full ratio. So because we don't have a full ratio, we can't do law of sines. In order to do law of sines, we usually have angle A and side A, but in this case, we don't have a full fraction. But we do know what angle A is. So if we know what angle A is, let's look back at our formula. And the formula we could use, if you know angle A, is this first one. Let's just plug everything in. A squared is equal to B squared plus C squared minus 2 BC cosine of A. So A squared would equal 12 squared plus 14 squared minus 2 times 12 times 14 times the cosine of 39. And I'm just going to type this into my calculator exactly as it looks. And if you type that in, you'd get 78.87 and then all these other numbers. So don't round that, but once you take the square root, you would get side A is equal to 8.9. And now we do have a full fraction. Because we have a full fraction, what we could do is we could use the law of sines to finish this. You can't use Pythagorean theorem because that only works with right triangles. So side A would be 8.9. And I'm just going to go ahead and cross multiply here. If we cross multiply, we'd get that the sine of B is equal to 0.8504. But to get angle B, we have to take the inverse sine of both sides. And that would be 58.3 degrees. To get angle C, we just do 180 degrees minus angle A and B. So 180 minus 39 minus 58.3 comes out to 82.7 degrees. You always want to make sure all of your angles add up to 180. And just to double check here, we have the smallest angle, smallest side, largest angle, largest side. So everything's good. All right, we had to use law of cosines because law of sines, we just didn't have a full ratio. So let's take a look at one more example today, and then I'll give you some homework. What if I told you that side A was 19, side B is 24.3, and side C is 21.8? Now you can see we obviously can't use law of cosines, or we can't use law of sines because we don't have any full fractions. We just have the sides. So the way that we're going to do this is we could use law of cosines. And remember what I told you, we always want to try to find the largest side or angle first. If you don't remember that, sometimes you could wind up with an answer where the largest angle is not opposite the largest side, and that would be a wrong answer. So the largest angle here would have to be angle B, because that has the largest side. So to find angle B, the formula was cosine of B equals a squared plus c squared minus b squared over 2ac. So 19 squared plus 21.8 squared minus 24.3 squared over 2 times 19 times 21.8. And if we type that in, I always do the top first and the bottom second. So 19 squared plus 21.8 squared minus 24.3 squared. This is 245.75 divided by 2 times 19 times 21.8 is 828.4. And that's the cosine of angle B. So if I want to get B by itself, I have to take the inverse cosine of both sides. And if we type that fraction and get the inverse cosine, so I'm going to type in the inverse cosine of 245.75 divided by 828.4, my calculator's telling me that angle B is 72.7. Now that we know that, I go ahead and fill that into my law of sines formula. And I'm going to try to find angle A. Now at this point, once we get our final answer, if we don't get the largest side opposite the largest angle, I'm going to go back and instead of finding angle A first, I'm going to find angle C first. It's a little tricky, but let's see what happens here. So I'm going to cross multiply and divide. And if I do 19 times the sine of 72.7 and then divide by 24.3, that comes out to 0.7465. If we take the inverse sine of both sides, the inverse sine here would give us A is 48.3 degrees. And then if we do 180 minus angle A and B, get angle C is 59 degrees. So let's just check. Smallest side, smallest angle. Largest side, largest angle. So everything works. So for homework, what I would like you to try is on page 286. I would like you to try numbers 14 to 22 even. All right. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.